a founder of NACDL, president 1979 through 1980, one of the founding fathers of NCDC, so a teacher of lawyers for well over 30 years. He's still on their board of regents, still making sure that they're teaching lawyers in a manner that they should be taught. He's the NACDL liaison to the board of delegates with the ABA, doing wonderful work. If you've seen what the ABA has come out and done in the last number of years on behalf of issues that we care about so much, you can thank people like J Krieger because of that. The Heaney Award winner from NACDL, which is our most prestigious award. 50 years of practice as an attorney. When you ask him what's one of the most joyful things that you had a chance to be involved in, and you know about all the cases that get the newspaper, but when you talk to him, he talks about 1972, and he talks about representing Native Americans back at Wounded Knee. There are people, I think, that would pay to listen to him read the phone book. I truly believe that. I think you're going to learn so much about what it means to be a lawyer from the king of lawyers, the lawyer of lawyers, J Krieger.
Thank you, Bob. What kind words, and greatly appreciated, and I wish I could live up to them, even in part. This has been an enormously satisfying day, a fulfilling day. When I came by yesterday and I saw the crowded courtroom, shows you where my head is, the crowded assembly room here, and all of you listening to Larry, I couldn't help but think of, my gosh, how far we have come. And then today, to sit at lunch with 400 of us and have a judge who is revered in this area and in other areas where he is known, and a former Attorney General address us, I could not help but think more and more about what this association is and from where it has come and where it is going. And I think the answers to those questions, which may not have all that much to do with specific cross-examination, but certainly are the matrix for a lot of the thinking of a defense lawyer, are bound up in a group of lawyers, as it says in 1958, getting together and putting together what in many respects was just about a drinking club and nothing quite more than that. And it was of such broad and sweeping influence that in 1972, if I have the year correct, they had their annual meeting in Dallas, and 34 people attended. And we thought it was pretty good. 34 is not bad, you know. It's a lot better than 16. But it was 34 lawyers attended. And at that meeting, a gentleman whom I don't see here at the moment, but was here during lunch, a man named Joseph Beeler, was working with the Wounded Knee Legal Offense and Defense Committee out at Wounded Knee, and sent a telegram to the NACDL. He was a member of the NACDL and must have been deluded into thinking that this was an association that could do something. He sent a telegram saying that in the state of South Dakota, there was not one lawyer who would undertake the representation of any one of the roughly 145 Native Americans who were charged with various crimes under the Assimilated Crimes Act. We asked a person who was going to become president of the association, and in whose memory the Keeney, I'm getting mixed up, it's okay. And in whose memory our most prestigious award was founded, to go out to South Dakota and see if it were true. He came back and told us it were true. And from there, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers started to grow and became the association that you see here now. An association that, through some of its representatives, has enormous impact upon our legal system. Right back there in the corner is Neil Sonnet. He is probably the most respected voice in the American Bar Association, without question. To see him stand in front of 500 and some odd lawyers from around the country in the House of Delegates and make his arguments all on behalf of that which is right and proper and appropriate under our system of law, and be persuasive and be understood and be accepted, makes you proud to know him. But it makes you doubly proud when you realize that what he is saying as well is that he is preaching the tenets of this association. There are some of you here who are not members, and I certainly suggest to you that if you think that you have profited from these 2 days of seminar, then you certainly should become members. This seminar has been one of those that we will point to in the future as being enormously successful. And of course, the content of the seminar is what makes the seminar. Larry's primo performance yesterday, and that which you heard today, and just a couple of hours ago, you were figuratively, if not literally, stamping your feet by what Jeff had to say and Jeff's remarks. Well, that is what this association in many respects is all about. We want you to become lawyers. Lawyers who are ready, willing, and able to stand up with vigor, integrity, and intelligence in your representation of your clients. Which, believe it or not, is a lead-in to what has been my assigned topic. And in truth, I don't recall what the name of the topic was. I know it had something to do with keeping people interested. And what are you laughing at? It is something which in cross-examination as well as in the trial itself is painfully neglected. You have heard techniques. You have been given examples of what we might say in many respects almost appear to be mathematical formulas. And if you were to multiply this leg by this hypotenuse, you would get this particular answer. Or you can get the area, or you can get the cubic footage. But that's not what a trial is. And that's not how you should be conducting yourself in trial. One of the greatest fallacies is that we look to other lawyers, we look to the judge, we look to our peer approval to determine whether or not we have done that which we should do in an examination or in a presentation. And where that is total nonsense is that the case is not being tried, and I'm talking only about jury cases, the case is not being tried to the judge. And the case is certainly not being tried to your fellow lawyers. The case is being tried to 12 people or 6 people who really don't like lawyers all that much, who equate lawyers with second-hand salesmen most of the time. They find you untrustworthy, and they might well categorize you, classify you with Steve's descriptions of stitches. You really have the same low quality when it comes to reliability. So if you try your case in order to have the judge smile upon you, which generally means move it along, buddy, or if you're going to try the case so that you can come back to the defense table and co-counsel or counsel representing a co-defendant is going to say, hey, great job, because that lawyer wants you to say that when he or she comes back to the table. We want approval. We know that when we get up in front of the jury, there is that which to worry about. Are we going to do what we should do? Are we going to be persuasive? Are we going to establish a defense? Are we going to be able to convince or persuade a jury that the witness is not telling the truth, or the true version of events is something other than that which this witness thought it was? Well, how are you going to do that unless you're communicating with people who are literally persons unfamiliar with the niceties of the legal system, and who really are not going to get themselves too much involved with whether technically, by this careful analysis, which would probably cross a rocket scientist's eyes, there is a reasonable doubt. How are you going to get it across to people like that? And I'm not saying people like that in a derogatory sense, far from it, but people disassociated from the way you think, or I think, in respect to the law, in respect to evidence, in respect to presentation of case. Well, we heard at the end of Steve's presentation some references to parallels by which you evaluate the truth-telling nature of that which you have heard from a witness. Every lawyer has his or her own little method of expression in respect to those problems. But I like to begin at a different point, and I suggest this to you for your consideration. I feel that I am doing my job as a trial lawyer when I look over at the jury and there are heads nodding. Or there is a juror mouthing the next question. Then I feel I am communicating with that jury. that juror understands where I'm going, understands the purpose of my examination, and is participating in this task. Well, how does the juror get to know this much in order to evaluate that which I am asking, that which I'm putting in a question, or evaluate the merit of it, or whether it's worth going for? And the answer is painfully simple. You have heard, because we like to break up things into this segment and that segment and the other segment, and you have heard probably in discussions concerning the opening statement that the opening statement may well determine whether or not the jurors feel guilt or innocence, whether they're going to vote not guilty or whether they're going to vote guilty. That the jurors will do that on a properly constructed opening, a properly presented opening. It may be that when the case is over right then and there, and there have been papers written on this. I've heard I don't know how many lawyers argue it to groups that it is so, and it is not. It is not. And to adopt that kind of position is really ridiculous. But let us take the opening statement. We talked about, well, Steve talked a few moments ago about criminal records. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as you are aware, assuming there have been some instructions, there is no burden upon the defendant to prove anything. So it is kind of conflicting, kind of contradictory, that representing a person, representing an individual, where the law says that there is nothing that I have to present, but that the burden of proof is on the prosecution, I undertake a burden, and I will prove to you certain things. And those things that I will prove to you, I will show to you in the proof, so infect the quality of the case as presented by the prosecution that you will have no choice but to return a verdict of not guilty. It's close to argumentative, but it is not, because everything is linked to what I am going to show or going to prove, or what the evidence will show or the evidence will prove. Let us talk about a principal piece of evidence, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to put John Jones on the witness stand. You're going to see him come out of that door, get up on the witness stand, swear to tell the truth, and the government is going to be urging upon you that that testimony is the truth. And immediately, when the cross-examination begins, you will learn that that person is a consummate liar. How is the person known to be a liar, and why do I say this to you, and how can I show it to you? Very simple. This person has been convicted 3 times of fraud, or this person has stolen from his mother, or whatever it is. Whatever the underlying circumstances of the impeachment are, you spell out as evidence that you are going to establish in your case. Well, what happens as a result of you doing that? First of all, the jury has picked up something that they wouldn't get otherwise, and if they were to get it just in question and answer, there's a sterility to it that is avoided by linking that evidence to the impact that you are trying to give to it. how it is going to affect the evaluation, whether there's truth, whether there's not truth, whether there's guilt, whether there's innocence. So what happens when the time comes, the witness is on the stand, the jury knows you're going to be asking questions that are going to show the criminal background and therefore the untrustworthiness of that witness. Well, simple mathematics. You've now got it twice in front of the jury instead of one questionable way. It has been explained to the jury in a sense that they can assimilate. It also perhaps gives you a third go-round with the same evidence. And that third go-round is that probably the government is going to take that witness on redirect and try to neutralize some of the damage that is done. And all too frequently, that gives you a fourth opportunity to underscore this. Well, that's good stuff. It's better stuff, I suggest to you, if you can link it to words that are action words. I'm reminded of one cross, stock fraud cases. In a stock fraud case, you got to have a lawyer. There's always a lawyer defendant, almost invariably. And the lawyer defendant has generally made a plea deal or has made some kind of arrangement where the lawyer will not be prosecuted, or if prosecuted, will be prosecuted for something minor and insignificant. The reason for that being is, of course, that the lawyer is going to testify how blatantly rotten the sale of the stock was, or how the stock's value was inflated, a la Enron or what have you. Well, there is a way of conducting an examination that is going to get you to where you want to be. You can try to conduct the examination on the facts. That generally takes you not to where you want to go, because it's a rerun of what the government has laid before the jury already, and the jury is liable to be turned off, that is, not listen all that carefully because it's that old stuff all over again, and therefore it's going to be kind of driven home to the jury that that probably is what happened. Well, I'll give you a suggestion, and a warrant and represent, it has worked, and more than once. The one that I recall most clearly is Mr. Schlesinger gets on the witness stand. He's a lawyer. He's sweating out what's going to happen to him. And Mr. Schlesinger, you're a lawyer, are you not? Yes. Testified a few minutes ago, you're a lawyer, right? Yes. Under oath? Yes. And you know that say something under oath, penalties if you lie. Yeah. One of the penalties is that you're a perjurer. Yes. And a perjurer, that's a lawyer's way of saying liar. Yes. Well, you remember you appeared at an SEC hearing. You recall that, don't you? Yes. And before you testify, you did testify there, did you not? Yes. And before you testified, you raised your hand and swore to tell the truth. Yes. The same oath you took here today. Yes, that is true. And when you testified in front of the SEC, you lied. Yes. Making you a perjurer. Yes. And a liar. Yes. And as you sit here today, you are a liar and a perjurer. Yes. Thank you. What are we going to give them an opportunity to explain something? And think about it on redirect. What are they going to do? What has been opened up? The only thing that's been opened up is whether the person's a liar or not, or a perjurer or not. We haven't gone near the underlying circumstances of the case. But there is a witness who has characterized himself as a liar and a perjurer. Very strong words that have a ring to it that a jury understands, and that a jury was waiting for, because in the opening remarks I had talked about what they might hear from this particular lawyer. Look, we're living in the 21st century where we have discovery. We're not trying cases out of a brown paper bag anymore. There is disclosure. There is compelled production. The secrets which used to mark trials during my lifetime just do not exist. You know what the case is going to be. You anticipate what the witness's testimony is going to be. And if you know those things, then you know what you should be concentrating on in respect to examination, in respect to presentation. And I respectfully suggest to you that knowing that dictates your defense, and your defense is not, underscore not, capitalize it, put it in block, is not determined by what the government has decided its case is going to be. Because then you're playing somebody else's game, not your own. I want to infect the government's case, hopefully, so that the whole body of it is rotten and riddled with lies. But if I can only get 2 or 3 or 4 lies, and they are material and important, I have a reasonable doubt. I can stand there with a straight face at the conclusion of the case and argue reasonable doubt, and not by being a 12th century monk counting the angels on the head of a pin. I am not doing that. I have substance. I have big things with which the government is strangling. If they have a principal witness who has characterized himself as a perjurer and as a liar, boy, it takes guts to stand in front of the jury and say you could believe that witness beyond a reasonable doubt and convict the defendant. Jurors won't do it. Jurors won't do it. I tried a case here in the Southern District of Florida where it was terrible. The whole local government was bribed. I don't think there was an honorable commissioner. Yeah, they were all getting money. There were checks running around all over the place. And as a matter of fact, you may have noticed in today's paper, one person who was involved in the case is now running for the commission But lo and behold, they found out he's living in the wrong county. He's still going through his life lying. You know, you can't operate any other way. But my client was a most successful civic bond sales representatives. He was, I think, number 10 in the country. And he was thinking in terms of, well, let's look at the transaction. We will try the case on the basis of the transaction. So way back at the beginning, he was a lawyer too, he says to me, look, we've got to be prepared to discuss synthetic variable interest. Well, can't catch me sleeping. I said, what? What are you talking about? He started to explain synthetic variable interest to me. I got a headache, and we quickly talked about something else. Oh, maybe a year had gone by, and we had disagreements about a lot of things. Case finally goes to trial. We must be 2.5 months into the trial, and he says to me, what about our expert on synthetic variable interest? I had to scratch my head to remember that there was such a thing as synthetic variable interest. And I said, well, what about synthetic variable interest? He says, well, we've got to explain it to the jury. I said, are you out of your mind? You crazy? You got 12 people sitting in the box. 6 of them don't speak English. 3 of the remaining 6 have trouble with English. The other 3 hate you. So we're going to talk synthetic variable interest to them, and on top of it, who's going to tell them about it? You? You're not getting near the witness stand. Me? That's ridiculous. Said, but I tell you something else. That jury may not understand synthetic variable interest even if you gave them brain transplants. But they know stealing. And if they think you didn't steal, you're going to get acquitted. If they think you stole, well, we'll see how the appeal goes. Point being, the terminology, the sense of the case, that which is being displayed to the jury, was in a term simple, comprehensible, and easily pictured in the mind of the jury. Stealing. Well, there's no way in which anybody could explain stealing in that case unless getting involved in synthetic variable interest, which we're not going to get into, and if the government got into it, they'd probably be proving our defense, if they could make it comprehensible. It's all part of the same package. It doesn't matter whether the trial lasted a week or the trial lasted, well, as I remarked at lunchtime, 6 months in front of Judge Hoover. Whether the trial lasted 6 months. The length of the trial, the length of the witness's testimony does not determine the length of your cross. Again, you're playing somebody else's game if you do that. You have to find that little thing which is the same as a parasite living in the blood of the witness, and get that in front of the jury and walk away. I can't say that it's something that I have done without mistake, over many years, it's nonsense. We all make mistakes. We all look back if we have any candor in ourselves and say, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe I should have done something in a different way. Unfortunately, it's not exactly true. In certain respects, it was entertaining and rewarding. Represented John Gotti in the case in which he was convicted. So I'm entitled to credits here and now because I have admitted at a seminar that I've lost a case. You rarely hear a lawyer admit that at a seminar. But Sammy the Bull Gravano testified for, I think, close to 3 weeks. And I allowed myself, I take full responsibility for this, I allowed myself to be pressured by the client to extensively cross-examine Sammy. It was against my better judgment, which I did not urge too strongly upon the client. I was dealing with an extremely vigorous personality, shall we say, who had demonstrated his ability to act impulsively at other times, in other ways. So I followed what I thought would make the client happy, and I took my eye away from the jury. And I played Sammy Gravano's game. Well, you deal with somebody he may be all the bad things that Steve mentioned, but he's also smart. And the result is you're going to get hurt with a couple of answers. But more importantly, you give him an opportunity to not only double dare you, but doubly endorse his reasons, perhaps, his testimony on direct, when I know what I should have done. And what I should have done was as follows. In the opening statement, and this is something I will never forget, in the opening statement, Andy Maloney, who is the U.S. Attorney, tells the jury that yes, Sammy Gravano has a checkered past, that he has committed, I think he said 14 murders. Okay? That's pretty good stuff, you think, you know? Defense table, in spite of what I said before about discovery and production, at defense table, what did he say? How many was that? What? Your ears are ringing, you know, 14? Say to John, 14? He says, so that got us completely nowhere. Judge takes a break immediately after Andy's opening. Go out in the hallway. I said, Andy, what the hell are you talking about? I knew about 5. Where does 14 come from? He says, what 14 are you talking about? I said, the 14 that you just mentioned. He said, 14 was 19. He said, 19. What I should have done was conducted a cross-examination about that big, just on the number of murders, and the fact that even the government was confused as to how many he committed, and that the evidence involving him in the murders came out of his mouth. Period. End of story. It's something which establishes him as a total murderer. It makes him totally repulsive to the jury, and if you stand any chance It's there. Instead of going into what happened when he was sworn in and, who administered the oath and whether they blew on the fire in his hands, that bullshit. You know? It takes you nowhere. It takes you nowhere. Let me circle back. But first, let me say thank you. I realize it's Friday afternoon. You have to be tired. You've heard so much. You've got to be super saturated. And I appreciate your patience and your attention very, very much. What you need, if you want to be as good a lawyer as you can be, is a friend. A real friend. I've been blessed twice over. I had an associate until just recently. As a matter of fact, if I were to go to trial tomorrow, she'd work with me anyway. Susan Van Dusen. By the way, we once represented a guy who was mixed up with a whole bunch of bank failures, and he comes into the office, and I say, I'd like you to meet Susan Van Dusen, my associate. He says, Susan Van Dusen? Yes. He says, I had a quarter horse with that name. Then promptly the next day brings in a book of the horse. That's Susan Van Dusen under it. But Susan and the other is my wife, Irene. Irene attends most of my trials and has done it for a good 35 years. Susan goes back close to 30. And they will not, and they do not, say, when you come back to the table, great job, terrific. You really hung them up. Oh, you set up a real reasonable doubt there. They tell you where you stunk up the courtroom. I will never, along with the other things that I won't forget, was once I thought I ate the guy's lungs. I tell you, I thought I left that witness in pieces on the floor. And if you wanted to measure the quality of the cross-examination by the sweat that poured from his brow, it was classic. And I come back to the table with a bit of a swagger, and Susan says to me, what point were you trying to make? After the dust settles and you're back talking to each other again, that kind of thing, you start to realize that, again, you're thinking too much like a lawyer and not as a person. Now, Steve mentioned the cross-examination of your mother. I must claim propriety to that example because I said it to groups about 40 years ago, that the best cross-examiner I ever ran into was my mother. And boy, could she get the truth out of me, or get me to say whatever it was she wanted me to say, whether I liked it or not. The only way there'd be peace in the house is if I said it, so I said it. We have that same formulation in the trial of a case, in how we handle our witnesses. We have to, one, keep it simple. KISS principle applies. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple. Number two, keep it short. Number three, keep it precise. If you do that, some of the problems we're talking about cure themselves because they cannot fit into this very short and precise package. I know it's the end of the day, and I don't know about you, but I'm tired. I'll answer some questions if you have any. Otherwise, I want to thank you for your patience and wish you all well. And by the way, there's my wife.